people around me in real life are all disconnected to me because they're all in their own echo bubbles. And so for me, I have enough metacognition to realize that I'm in an echo bubble, and every once in a while I disrupt the filtering patterns and I go create a new echo bubble. There's really no way to escape the echo bubbles. You can just pick and choose your echo bubble. The things we all think and say in the Bitcoin filter bubble, they don't make any sense to people outside of it. But I could pass you information about a specific meme or an indicator we both look, whatever, and it would be like a funny inside joke, whatever. You know, that's true of all sorts of communities online, whether it's like medical or you're environmentalist or whatever it is, right? We used to have more shared media. So now in American life and global life also, the unshared environment is massive. We used to have a lot more of a shared environment because we were all inhaling the same media platforms more or less, right? And now we're not. Now our favorite television show is some guy on YouTube or a collection of guys on Twitter or whatever it is. And that's how we're entertaining ourselves and get our information.
Today I'm sitting with the original American HODL. HODL has been a very professional and public figure that aped into Bitcoin 6 years ago with little capital, but today he has grown his net worth to astronomical levels. HODL has been deplatformed from Twitter many, many times, too many times to count, but he's back as @the American HODL. More importantly, by the way, don't count on him staying there. More importantly, HODL has been responsible for helping pull hundreds of people out of poverty by exposing them and educating them to Bitcoin. HODL, welcome to the show.
That's a really nice introduction. Jack Dorsey is following me yet again. So you know, you would
and
think
his team will just kick you off at some point. It's like, hello.
It really shows you that he doesn't have a lot of control over there at Twitter. You know, there's a system of selective pressures that he has no say in what happens. There's a lot of algorithmic banning that happens over there too. I've noticed.
Yeah, I think that might be what's happening with you in some ways. You know, I don't know that's necessarily like a team. You know what I mean? You
just use a little bit of the wrong think, something that's not in the Overton window, and people go banned immediately, right? And so, of course, if you're, somebody like me who likes to be a free thinker, you want to go straight for that. Yeah. And that's, I think, why I keep getting,
So funny. And honestly, like, if you were going to get banned, it would have been the day that I jumped on and heard you on Spaces, which you got banned from Spaces, which is so funny.
I got banned from Spaces, yeah.
And that was like you and Dieter Bob going at it. Like, it was and then somebody made a meme tweet, which was absolutely hilarious, of like the South Park guys. I was like, oh my God, Dieter Bob's voice is perfect for this.
Yeah, if you don't know, Dieter Bob is a notorious troll in the Bitcoin space on Twitter. And so I decided, I was like, let's hear what he sounds like. Let's go ahead. And so we had a quote unquote debate. It was just us yelling at each other for about 20 minutes. And it was funny. Like, people in the community got a lot of entertainment value out of it. I did as well. I think it was interesting to hear, a notorious and prolific troll such as himself actually espouse his views in audio form. And I didn't think he held up very well.
Talking about 6.15 and 7 3/4. That's great. Hey, listen, it was entertainment, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, listen, bro. They say you are the average of the 5 people you surround yourself with the most. So I'm curious these days, who do you surround yourself outside of your wife and kids, right? Who are you talking to the most these days on calls or whatever?
Yeah, it's interesting. It's probably a lot of Bitcoin friends and Clubhouse friends like yourself. It'd be hard for me to I think it's hard for me to narrow it down to any 5 people, but it really is just the echo chamber of the Bitcoiners that are cross-platform. So really, I do this thing. It's sort of in that question, the average of the 5 people you hang around with is kind of antiquated in this sense that I think really you are you're going to think the way it's dependent on the echo bubbles that you're in online nowadays, right? So people around me in real life are all disconnected to me because they're all in their own echo bubbles. And so for me, I have enough metacognition to realize that I'm in an echo bubble. And every once in a while I disrupt the filtering patterns and I go, create a new echo bubble. There's really no way to escape the echo bubbles. You can just pick and choose your echo bubble, right?
That's what's cool about Clubhouse. You could just go into the hallway. I saw you do it yesterday, actually. I jumped in a room that you were in and they were talking about, God, I forget exactly what it was, but it was totally non-Bitcoin related.
Like wokeism or something.
Wokeism. Yeah. It was like, I was like, what is he doing in there? I got to listen to this shit, right? So I jump in. You're not on stage, right? You're just listening. And I found it interesting. So I listened for like 10 minutes or so. And then I got a notification. I jumped to something else, but because I have I have attention deficit disorder, but yeah.
It's as interesting as it is frightening, because you realize that, for instance, the right and the left wings of America they have no common ground anymore. They're living in totally separate realities. And, it's scary in that manner, because you're othering basically half of America. And then everybody else is in their own very niche filter bubble, right? Like the things we all think and say in the Bitcoin filter bubble, they don't make any sense to people outside of it, right? But I could pass you information about a specific meme or an indicator we both look at, whatever, and it would be like a funny inside joke, whatever. And that's true of all sorts of communities online, whether it's like medical or you're an environmentalist or whatever it is, right? And and it's probably always been true, but we used to have more shared media. So now in American life and global life also, the unshared environment is massive. Whereas we used to have a lot more of a shared environment, because we were all inhaling the same media platforms, more or less, right? And now we're not. Because now our favorite television show is not a television show. It's some guy on YouTube, or a collection of guys on Twitter, or whatever it is. And that's how we're entertaining ourselves. Yeah, and get our information.
Yeah, 100%. Which is kind of crazy. The interesting thing is this relates back also like the Facebook algorithms and the YouTube algorithms. Obviously, we were talking about that earlier before we jumped on. There's like these algorithms that they decide what to show us and what not to show us, and all this kind of stuff to the users, the discovery. So you get stuck in an echo chamber without even recognizing it. I think a lot of people, to your point though, having the self-awareness, what do you call it? The metacognition, right?
Yeah, it's just a fancy way to say you're thinking about how you're thinking. If you can do that, just take one step outside yourself and look at your own thoughts and behavior, you're going to be successful in life, because that's pretty much like, for instance, the market psychology stuff that we deal with on a daily basis as, market participants, guys who have wealth, are trying to preserve wealth, or trying to grow wealth. You have to really manage your emotions a lot, because it's not like you don't feel the emotions when the price goes heavily down or the price goes up super quickly. You do feel those emotions. You just have to know how to like manage them, sit through them, observe them. You got to learn to meditate, or work out, or whatever your thing is, right? Like turn off your phone, whatever.
Hey, listen, speaking of the price, our last show was May 6th. We published it. So we recorded it about a week, I think, before that. The Bitcoin price at that time was up and kind of steady around 50,000 when we recorded. In March, Tesla announced they're going to accept Bitcoin for payment for new Teslas. Then a couple of weeks after our show, they announced, Musk tweeted out that image where they said they're no longer going to accept Bitcoin as a payment for Tesla due to climate concerns. Then Michael Saylor reached out on Twitter. They had a call with the miners. The Bitcoin community didn't like that so much, so they tried to make it a little more transparent. Elon sent out a positive tweet after that meeting. Then he later sent out a cryptic tweet. It was like a couple breaking up. So it was implying that there was a breakup between him and Bitcoin possibly, and everybody freaked out and reacted. Jack Dorsey then recently tweeted out to him and said, hey, we should have a conversation in public. So they've agreed on a date, July 21st. I think the Tesla earnings call is July 28th. What do you think of all this shit? Like, what do you think of this whole Elon crap? He just keeps himself around Bitcoin. He's constantly trying to remain in Bitcoin.
I used to be more of a Elon fanboy until Elon took an interest in my thing, which is Bitcoin. And then I realized why people hated him, because when Elon takes an interest in your thing and then it's erratic and a lot of what he's saying is wrong, it's the same thing as Donald Trump getting interested in your thing. And you know what? Honestly, I think with Trump off Twitter, I think Elon is the new Trump. Like, he probably is the biggest, most erratic, most controversial, most provocative voice on Twitter, right? So, for me, this whole thing just comes down to incentives. The CAGR on carbon credits, which, Elon's business has been running off for the last several years. Over the last 5 years, the CAGR on carbon credits has been higher than Bitcoin. So it really shows you who his true masters are. And essentially somebody at the EPA or wherever, to me, it seems, passed him this information and said, we don't like Bitcoin because we think Bitcoin uses too much energy. There's this schism between the new environmental left, which, like, if I'm being frank, they want to use, they want to use wind and solar to institute, cultural Marxism and then ultimately full on socialism. because, I mean, think about it. ESG movement is environmental. Okay, everybody loves the environment. Yeah, we all need the environment. What's the S and the G stand for? Because to me, it sounds a lot like communism. Like what does social and governance have to do with investment? So anyway, I think that the carbon credits are the carrot that is leading Elon around. And I think a stick came from behind the scenes that none of us saw or knew about. And he was sort of his hand was sort of forced to post that. And now here's the thing about this. Elon's a genius. So this is like a pawn sacrifice. He gave up nothing in doing this. What he sacrificed was he used a piece of FUD, transactional energy use FUD, basically saying that each Bitcoin transaction uses like as much as a gallon of oil, which isn't true. We go into the technical reasons why not, because transactions are batched and yada yada, and the hashing takes place over 2 weeks and et cetera. But it was a genius maneuver on his part because all he had to give up was consumers buying Teslas in Bitcoin. And nobody was going to buy a Tesla in Bitcoin. Literally nobody. They might have gotten 3 orders, right? Because that's not what consumers want to do with their Bitcoin. They want to hoard their Bitcoin. They want to use Bitcoin as a store of value. So at the same time, he gets to sacrifice this, look good to the EPA. He causes a little bit of chaos in the Bitcoin price. Maybe he's buying more on the side. I don't know. He gets to do all of this and still hold over $1 billion worth of Bitcoin on his balance sheet. So he sacrificed nothing except a little bit of his reputation inside the Bitcoin space. And to him, obviously, that was a worthwhile trade-off because he doesn't give a shit about people inside the Bitcoin space. Yeah. It also sets up the energy use transactional thing, sets up Elon is an energy guy, right? So it sets up the possibility that Tesla could get into the mining business in the future and do quote unquote green mining with battery packs and solar arrays and whatever else it's going to look like. So he's obviously pushing that renewable energy thing really hard. And that's where the mining council and the Michael Saylor stuff and all of that comes in.
All right. So if I'm not mistaken, like 2/3 of all hash rate was coming out of China before all this happened. Is that right? Yeah. Okay. Yes. So he's going to try to be the hero here, right?
Well, it was between 40 and 60%. We're not exactly sure how much. Yeah. We're gonna know exactly in a few weeks how much it was because it's all leaving. That's my point.
So when it all leaves, he's going to come out and say, probably in July 21st, right? When he does that meeting, I think he's going to come out and say, or kind of in a way take credit for, hey, I got us out of China. Number one, coal producing energy, and then number two, the 51% attack thing is gone. Like no one can ever, and the threat of, well, what if my China bans it? Well, they banned it and it didn't kill it. So he's going to be like the hero on 3 fronts, and it looks like he was the villain for the first couple of months, but he's going to turn this into becoming the hero. Do you think that's what he'll try to do at some point, or do you think maybe you think his fans will do it? I mean, is that the narrative?
Listen, there's a lot of Elon simps out there who, whatever Elon does, they're going to say it was a 4D chess move and he meant to do it. Elon is a guy who rushes into chaos and then just starts making decisions. I don't know if you ever heard him talk about his like decision matrix ideology, but he basically is like, I just make a lot of decisions because most people are scared to make decisions. So I make hundreds and hundreds of decisions. And if one of them is wrong, I just go back and correct it. So I think Elon doesn't care. I think that people will view it this way or that. But like when you talk about like, and I don't know how much Elon had of how much effect he had on China and China's decisions. I think very little.
No, of course, but it looks perfect. The timing and the setup is perfect. So,
but to talk about the Chinese thing, I think this has been on my wish list for a long time because as an American Bitcoiner, like let me just put it out on the table. I want America to continue to be in pole position around the world. I don't want China or Russia to be in pole position. I don't know if there is a world where America falls and we all get more freedom somehow. I don't think that's likely, right? So if you're going to have a superpower, I really would like it to be a democratic republic, which is still, it's hanging by a thread, but it's still America today, right? So for me, I want America to have a prosperous.
So you're saying there's a chance.
Exactly. Yeah. I want America to have a prosperous century. And I think a large part of that is going to be accumulation of the Bitcoin supply. There's sort of like a monetary space race going on here. And China basically just shot themselves in the foot. They just blew up their rocket on the launch pad. Like they are not going to be taking part in the Internet of Value, which is what Bitcoin is. And that's huge for American Bitcoin dominance. And we're already seeing these miners. I saw a picture on Twitter the other day of a Chinese miner who was eating barbecue down in Austin, Texas, right?
Yeah.
He had come to Austin. He's already setting up shop. Texas has very friendly Bitcoin laws. I mean, it's fantastic. And as Bitcoiners, we want hash power to be as decentralized as possible. So these rigs, these mining rigs, they're not just going to America, they're going to Africa, Latin America, the Middle East, etc. So it's great in terms of the geopolitical wargaming of Bitcoin. And I think it was inevitable that this was going to happen because China's threatened Bitcoin a lot because it allows Chinese citizens access to capital flight, which is a big problem for China if you're trying to run the kind of system that they're trying to run. So yeah, I mean, it was inevitable, and I'm glad it happened. Honestly,
I agree. You mentioned something the other day. The final, I think you called it. Maybe I'm mischaracterizing, but I think you called it like the final attack from America could be a wealth tax on unrealized gains for Bitcoin.
I think that's most likely because we all have this image of America in our minds of like, the 1950s America, post World War II, at the height of our powers, where we really were the best and we really could get a lot done. We had a lot of influence in the world at that time, but that America is sort of gone, and it's been replaced by a lesser version of that America, unfortunately. So I don't think America or any nation state has the ability to attack Bitcoin from a technical perspective. And I don't even think they have the ability to attack it from a regulatory perspective. I think the two prongs they might use if they want to get their, hands around Bitcoin essentially is, some sort of a ghettoization or a co-option that looks like bans on self-custody. Maybe Wall Street gets control, and then you create these bigger honeypots that have leverage points that the powers that be can, work from behind the scenes. Another one will be the AOC types, the Elizabeth Warren types, going out in Congress and saying that it's not fair. All these Bitcoiners did was buy a bunch of lines of code, and now they're rich, and nobody should be this rich. And Satoshi will be the first trillionaire when Bitcoin hits $1 million, and having the world's first trillionaire be anonymous and like we can't have this, and all this kind of stuff. So I think they're going to come at it from that wealth tax angle, and they're already talking about a wealth tax for regular American citizens that are just fiat denominated. So if you're over 50 million net worth, they want to take 1% of your net worth every year, essentially, right? Which is, I mean, it's just crazy. What world are we living in that you get to tax unrealized capital gains? Like,
that's just theft. I mean, think about it. They're taking something that you haven't even monetized. Who knows what the value is?
You don't even know if you have it. It's unrealized. You know what I mean? It's a projection, right? It's like oh God, don't get me started on this.
The only thing that I think about this, I'm always like, it seems unconstitutional, but I guess in a way they're constantly taxing you on real estate as in an unrealized gain, right? So like their argument, I think, is going to be is real estate. You know what I found was funny?
Yeah.
And I don't remember who's all on this podcast. You know the All In podcast? Chamath, David Sachs, Jason Calacanis, and I think is it Freeberg? I don't know who the other one is. I don't even know him. I remember them doing an episode. I think they're Democrats, right? Most of them. I know Chamath certainly is, right?
Oh,
and,
yeah.
And I remember them doing an episode, and they're like, we voted for him, but we didn't expect this. It's like, what do you expect? It's like the scorpion and the frog, guys. Come on, Me
personally, a large part of why I'm Republican is because I want lower taxes. Right. It's not because I agree with the Republicans on everything. It's because I like to keep my own money. You know what I mean? And, it's really easy to avoid taxes when you're in the multi-billionaire range, right? But if you're on the come up in America, you're under $100 million net worth, you can get squeezed the fuck out, and they will do that to you. But because regular people, we've talked about this, regular people think that $50 million is like a shit ton of money. And really $50 million is like the basis for what it is to be ultra high net worth, I think, after all the monetary inflation that's gone on. So it's really, I mean, yeah, don't get me wrong. It's a lot of money. You can do a lot of things in life with that money, but it's not as much money as the average person thinks it is. But try telling that to somebody who, doesn't have any net worth. The average American has less than, they don't have $400 in the event of an emergency, right? They live paycheck to paycheck. Their wages are stagnant while things around them are getting more expensive. We're going to have to do universal basic income at some point, et cetera, et cetera. So economic populism is going to be with us for the next, decade plus, like probably the next 3-4 decades in American life, and we're just going to have to deal with it. And it's going to take, it's just going to be very, very bad for people who have wealth, and it's going to cause wealth to flee from America, which is sad.
Since we've talked, El Salvador decided to take Bitcoin and make it a legal tender. I believe Paraguay is thinking about doing it. I don't think they've actually passed it, right? So did they pass it, or they just say they're thinking about it?
No, not yet. There's a bill that was going to be introduced. And Panama.
Yeah,
also.
exactly. That's
Panama
my point. So it's like dominoes toppling. Where do you see this going? Because like individually, you can laugh them off. You're like, $60 billion GDP. That's like a county in most states in New Jersey, where I live. And then you get 60 and 50, and before you know it, you got hundreds of millions. Billions rather. Then it just grows, and it becomes collectively as large as a large nation. If a lot of these smaller, quote unquote, banana republic type of countries start doing this, right? Where's this going?
It's important from a narrative perspective too, because New Jersey is not a country. New Jersey doesn't have sovereignty. El Salvador does have sovereignty, right? So it's important from that perspective that sovereign nations are adopting this at the geopolitical level, and that's a big deal. Like when I was down in Miami, they told everybody, they were like, "Hey, make sure you hang out. We got a really special announcement." They were really hyping it up, and I was like, whatever. Like I've been to enough conferences that it's probably going to be something that is like, I could see that coming. But this one, where it was actually they made Bitcoin legal tender, I did not see it coming. And honestly, it took a while for it to sink in what it meant, because I think it means a lot. Like, and one of the things that the El Salvadorian president, Bukele, I think you pronounce his name, he said that really made sense to me was, essentially they introduced this bill for free, right? This cost them nothing to do. And he said that if just 1% of the Bitcoin market cap was to flow to his country in whatever form that takes, that would increase their GDP by 25%. So you have essentially something that is zero cost of entry, and it has a potential asymmetric upside of 25% GDP. What Latin American nation is not going to want to do that? What African nation is not going to want to do that, right? Like if you can create favorable mining and regulatory environments for Bitcoiners will come, because a lot of Bitcoiners, their Bitcoin holdings are more important to them than their national identities. And it's like the old Benjamin Franklin quote, which is essentially like, any place that liberty is, that's my nation, right?
Funny you say that, Hal, because immediately announcing that, obviously he's working with Jack Mallers, right? One of the largest Bitcoin bulls or influencers or whatever, proponents of Bitcoin, right? So you got Jack Mallers down there integrating with them, right? And then you get Peter McCormick to go down and sit with him. He's so lucky. No, I'm just kidding. No, but seriously, like this is a top Bitcoin influencer and blogger, right? So he's giving himself and his country notoriety in the Bitcoin community. And then Colin and some people we know that are Bitcoin miners immediately shot down there. It's like, hey, let's see how we can help out. What can we do?
Oh yeah.
So the miners are going there. He's instantaneously bringing money into his ecosystem like right away. I mean, that's just like, come on. Why wouldn't smaller nations do this, right? It makes total sense.
I don't want to lionize this guy because I don't know anything about El Salvadorian politics. I don't know anything about him. I don't know anything about El Salvadorian politics. So disclaimer. But one of the things I thought was interesting was, so he was on a Twitter Spaces with a bunch of guys on Twitter that were high level Bitcoiners, and I think he's like in his mid 30s or something, right? He's a millennial. They told him about clean energy mining and Bitcoin. And he goes, what's interesting is we have these volcanoes, we have this geothermal energy. And literally, he goes, I don't have any plans for that at the moment, but let me think about it. Literally the next morning, he announces we're going to be using the clean geothermal energy to mine Bitcoin. And it just shows like when you have younger leadership that, you have the ability to move on things quickly and really skate to where the puck is going and get ahead of the next century. Whereas I think we have very backwards looking leadership here in America currently, because everybody's so goddamn old. You know what I mean? I don't think Joe Biden knows what room he is in half the time, right? Like he does that creepy thing where he whispers into the microphone and he's like, it goes to the economy, benefits everybody. Like, what are you doing? You sound like my grandpa, guy. Stop it. It's interesting when you have people in the prime of their life who are running a nation, because they can, essentially like embrace the future. Whereas people who are older, they tend to cling to the past. I thought that was something to note.
So we're on Clubhouse all the time. I probably, in my top 5, you're probably in my top 5, bro.
Yeah, you're probably in my top 5 too.
Technical analysis versus on-chain analysis. the Bitcoin community hates TA, right? I see so many of the maximalists, and you're wearing your maximalist hat today, so you're totally going to be a maximalist on this one. So tell us your feelings about TA, and tell us what you think about on-chain analysis versus technical analysis.
I think TA is like reading fan fiction. You know what I mean? You're going to be seeing what you want to see in the TA. It's like looking at a comic book. It's fun, it's entertaining, but you have to keep it in perspective. This is not a predictive tool. This is essentially like divination. It's like reading the tea leaves. It's like, telling your fortune off the palm of your hand. That is what you're doing when you're doing TA. You're just drawing shapes and patterns on charts, and everybody, one of the jokes we always make fun of the TA traders about is like, hey man, did your line break? Well, just draw a new fucking line. You know what I mean? That's what they do, right? And so nothing really matters in TA world. Everything is always a death cross or a golden cross or a holy cross or a this pattern or a Wyckoff distribution or a Bollinger Band or a hyperwave or a this or that. There's all these names for all these indicators. And listen, I like to look at them too. I think we and you have talked about this. I think it's interesting to look at them. But they're for entertainment value. I don't trade off of the information that's in them. I really, if I am going to take a trade, which is very rarely, if ever, it's based on gut feeling, experience in the markets, sort of timing, like a sense of where things are going, momentum. I don't do it based on, I saw this triangle on the chart and we're getting close to the end of the triangle, right? And I think what's interesting is the on-chain stuff, which is something that we have available to us in Bitcoin because of how transparent, public, and open the Bitcoin blockchain is, the public ledger is. And so, there's like a company called Glassnode in Bitcoin that does all the on-chain analytics that a lot of people use for their on-chain work. Like Willy Woo, for instance, is one of the biggest, and he uses them. It's interesting because we can actually see what's happening on-chain. We don't have to guess at stuff. So it's been, if you are a market participant that's not using on-chain analytics in order to get a sense of where things are going, you're not a very high level market participant in this market, essentially, because we have this new tool. And so why wouldn't you use it? It's a lot better than what TA is.
It gives you complete transparency into the inflows and the outflows on the exchange level, the age of the addresses, are these, and then the amount of coins that are on that address or going in and out of them. Yeah. I mean, you can't see that in the stock market. I mean, some type of transparency. A lot of it's in the rearview mirror, though.
One thing, for instance, is like we know for sure that when Elon made the transactional energy use tweet that we were talking about earlier, the new whales puked on the market. So the whales who came in with Elon, they left with Elon, right? And we can see that because of the age of the coins and where the coins were moving to and where they were coming from. And so it's just really good to know, as somebody who's a long-term investor, hodler, who has deep conviction in this, that my fellow long-term investors, hodlers, are not spooked, that they don't care, right? That essentially there was something that was a fake threat, and the new investors got spooked and ran off, but the old heads, they stayed.
And that's the thing. Like CNBC, they need to bring guys like Willy Woo and Will Clemente, who just came on the podcast the week before you did. You are here, rather. These guys should be on CNBC, right?
They should.
It shouldn't be like some random person at like, I don't even, Wedbush Securities or some shit. It's like, what do you know about Bitcoin? You're not talking about on-chain analysis. They should be talking about, because they're guessing what's happening in the market on television. That's what they do, right? They're literally sitting there and they're like, well, what do you think? Why do you think it's selling off this? It's like, well, you could kind of have a better idea if you talk about the age of the address, the amount. Is it a whale selling it? Like, they're not really ever talking about that. I'm not seeing that when I watch their clips,
I think what's interesting is Will Clemente, who, has over 100,000 Twitter followers, is 19 years old, right? And not to take anything away from Will at all. I think he's an incredibly smart kid and he's going to be very successful in life. But what I'm saying is, like, this information is publicly available to anybody. So Will, as a college kid, he grabbed this information and he's able to decipher it and discern it. And he's made a following for himself off the back of it. And, it's great. Now, the thing you need with the on-chain metrics is you really do need experience in the markets to know what they're telling you. Like, so for me, I only pay attention to one indicator. I've told you this multiple times. It's called the HODL wave data. And it essentially HODL wave. And it's essentially what the old coins are doing. And when you see a tremendous inflow of old coins come to exchanges, that is signaling a cycle top, because old hodlers have a really good sense of when things are getting toppy. and they have it's a reflexive phenomenon because they have the ability to cause the top to happen. So if enough hodlers get spooked, or not spooked, but just decide this is a good time to dump, I might buy that mansion I've had my eye on, whatever it is. Then they're going to dump on the new whales. The new whales are going to get spooked. The momentum guys are going to get spooked. It causes this cascading liquidations downward, and then we go down, and then we find ourselves in a bear market. The hodlers tend to wait to accumulate their coins. They wait about 18 months, maybe 24 months to reaccumulate. Then they buy in at the capitulatory bottom and start the whole cycle over again. This is how you make your money as a hodler, if you can time the markets, right? Like if you think you can do this and end up with a lot less Bitcoin. So I'm not saying this is an ideal strategy. I'm saying this is a strategy that a lot of the big whales do. And you got to think about it. Like I got 10,000 Bitcoin. I got in super early, right? Bitcoin was $1. I bought $10,000 worth. And now I'm worth, whatever it is, like $400 million or something, right? Like, to me, I want to live life a little bit, and I might want to take $40 million off the table, and I might want to do that at the appropriate time. You know what I mean? And so I think those are the types of hodlers who are selling like, a little bit of their coins just so they can live comfortably while they wait for Bitcoin to inevitably take over the world.
I got one more question for you. I was going to ask you what your price prediction is, but who gives a shit? The last, because I think we all know what it is. Like 300,000, right? We already know. You've said it many times.
It's like I think like 300 to 500K end of the year is what I think.
Right. So I've asked you this before. You haven't changed. You haven't wavered at all on this. So we'll move past that. I will say I saw an interesting tweet yesterday from Lyn Alden, and she says bears focusing on Tether's impact. Our friend George Noble. On Bitcoin over the past year would have probably done better to focus on the grayscale neutral arbitrage trade instead, when the new competition resulted in the market taking away GBTC's premium to NAV. The biggest Bitcoin buyer stopped buying, and that's what she's saying is the cause of the decline. I actually replied to it, and I said, how did Plan B know there would be a Bitcoin neutral arbitrage trade in GBTC when he created the stock to flow chart that predicted the 21 rise? It's so funny. But what do you think of that? Do you think that there's something to what she's saying in the short term that there was, because it seems like, and if you read through the comment threads in this, she had some answers explaining to people that they were basically buying up. It was an arbitrage, right? So they buy it and they're like, well, how could you do that? And you're like, well, they immediately short that position and they lock in the premium, right? So when the premium dried up, then the buying stopped. And so it was like this kind of self-fulfilling prophecy, pushing the price up faster and faster and faster and taking supply off the market, which pushes the prices up even more. It's like this compounded effect. And obviously that's evaporated. That's gone now. So what do you think of that?
BlockFi, for instance, is probably the biggest one in on this trade. BlockFi offers interest, on people's Bitcoin. In order to offer that interest, they have to generate yield, and the way they generate yield is by arbing the GBTC premium. And what I first thought was that BlockFi was lending out coins so that other shops could arbitrage this premium. And then I learned that they're operating as a prop shop and they're doing the trade themselves, which gives me a whole lot of pause surrounding BlockFi itself, because, who knows what their models look like to try and, this is a really large trade for them. I think some of the trades might be larger than the market capitalization of their company, which is like, okay, that's crazy right away. But there is something at the heart of the GBTC trade, I think, that's driving the markets. For me, the run up happened much faster than I was expecting. And so it's no surprise that we get this long reaccumulation consolidation period, sort of in the summer, in the middle of the year. That doesn't surprise me one bit, because when we hit 64 or whatever in I think it was March, right? Or something like that, like maybe early April. That was way too fast for me. Normally in 2017, we took a long time to retake all-time highs. There wasn't a lot of mainstream interest. And then this time it was like, boom, right out the gate and off to the races. And I think a lot of that had to do with this GBTC trade. And I think, you are seeing big buyers come back in and mop up those coins at discount, because that discount is extremely attractive, especially if Grayscale does what its stated intention is, which is to become an ETF at some point, meaning that that premium, that negative premium, would evaporate. Like Cathie would, for instance, just bought 1 million more shares of GBTC. I would imagine there's other institutional investors taking larger positions at the moment. It's very easy for institutions to get into GBTC because it's through their brokerage accounts. They're very used to it. So you just if you want to go buy 1 million shares of GBTC right now, you can just easily do it. Whereas if you want to go buy 1 million shares of $1 million worth of Bitcoin or something like that, you got to go set up an account. You got to take self-custody. There's custodial risk and all sorts of things that you have to think about that you don't have to think about with brokerage accounts. So I do think we're going to see the big whales start to reaccumulate GBTC heavy. And that's going to be one of the things and then it'll be the same story again, right? It'll go from this underlying market structure, and then the momentum guys will pile in, and then the alt season shit will get a flurry of attention from retail, and then there'll be this blow off ecstatic top. And then what I said will happen is the hodlers would dump and everything will come back down like this. And then I think that we're definitely, there's a theory called super cycle theory, which you know very well. That says that we're not going to have these massive drawdowns and bear cycles anymore in Bitcoin. I think that theory is total nonsense because of, the institutions, have quarterly mindsets, a lot of them. So they have to sell, in order to produce results. Otherwise you get fucking fired as the CEO.
Yeah. But you know what else, dude? We've talked about this a bunch too, is these wash sale rules are not applicable to Bitcoin. So you're going to get like professional traders that are going to take losses when they drop, and then they're going to short and become sellers, push it down further, it's going to create, the volatility is not going away. I thought early on, I was like, volatility probably dissipates as you get more participants holding onto Bitcoin, more people, not dollars, right? But you've reminded me, and this is where it kind of got me up the curve. I don't even reminded you actually taught me that this is a monetary network. So every dollar that goes in, right? So there's trillions of dollars that can come into this. So it's actually in the infancy stages still, relatively speaking, from that perspective.
Yeah, people misunderstand that. I don't know if we covered this in our last pod, but it's worth, I think, repeating. Is essentially Metcalfe's law gets bandied about, essentially, which is that every new network participant creates this network effect, and they bring in more network participants, and they're more useful to the network participants, et cetera, et cetera. But Bitcoin is, everybody has a different dollar value assigned to them, right? Like, Jay is a wealthy guy. Like, I'm doing all right myself. There are other people who have $25 to their name, right? So every new participant does not move the Bitcoin price in the same way. You need this is a monetary network. So if you were to orange pill somebody, you'd want to orange pill the richest person in the world, which is Elon Musk, which I think is why Michael Saylor went after Elon Musk. And then, he was willing to deal with some of the erraticism that came with it, essentially. And now maybe it tracks to Metcalfe's law in the sense that for every X amount of population, you get one billionaire, or you get $100 million person or ultra high net worth individual. Right. Maybe it tracks in that manner. I'm not sure about that, but I think the distinction of understanding it as a monetary network, because every dollar that comes in is the new participant in the system. I think that's important. That's important for your mental framework surrounding how this price moves and how the adoption curve works, et cetera.
I lied. I got another question. I thought I was done. I just remembered that yesterday at the close of the bell, Facebook was a $1 trillion company, right? So market cap hit $1 trillion. Fuck you, Facebook. Bitcoin beat you. But we've retraced, right? Why would you buy Facebook today when they've basically hit full saturation point in the network effect, right? Because now they can only monetize and increase monetization through two ways, in my opinion. Or three ways, I guess. They could create some new ideas. They've not done that. So that's not going to happen. They'll buy companies. They'll continue to do that. We know that, right? Or they have to expand the revenue per user. But they're not going to expand the users. They got everybody, basically. I mean, the growth is very little in terms of user growth. In fact, a couple of years ago, they actually declined on growth for the first time. But they've since fixed that. And I think Luke Kerner's the one that said to me that he thinks that that's when they really got hard on the fake news stuff. Like they really changed the algorithms, and then he thinks they just changed it back, which he's probably right about that, right? They're like, we can't do this at the detriment of the company, right? Why would somebody not be thinking about Bitcoin in the markets? Why would you buy Facebook? Like they're at the end of the run, right? Like it just doesn't make sense to me at this point. It doesn't make any sense in terms of growth.
Peter Thiel, who's a iconoclast in Silicon Valley, was on a podcast in January saying that essentially the winning move for the last 8 or 9 years would have been to just buy the FANG stocks and shut the fuck up, essentially. And he's right about that. Like, although I mean, you could have bought Bitcoin, but Bitcoin you couldn't have come in inside. He's a billionaire, so he's thinking from a billionaire's mindset. He said essentially just buy the FANG stocks, but it was too dumb. It was too easy. And so most professional money managers didn't want to tell their clients to do it because it insinuated that they weren't doing enough work and that they weren't earning their fees, essentially. And he thinks his idea for this decade is to just buy Bitcoin. It's the thing that is going to perform the best, just like the FANG stocks in the last decade. And essentially that professional money managers won't tell you to buy it. Your FA is never going to tell you to buy Bitcoin because it insinuates that they're not doing enough work, and they're not. I mean, most FAs are not worth what you're paying them to manage your money, right? Essentially. I think it's interesting for me from a psychological perspective because, Google just crossed $1 trillion in market cap last year. Apple, I think a few years before that, Microsoft around the same time, Facebook now, Amazon's over $1 trillion, right? It took all of those companies, a decade plus. Like I think the quickest one was Facebook. And so, what's interesting to me is that when they arrived at $1 trillion, every market participant saw them as the behemoths that they were, the powerhouses that they were, and every investor had to bow down and respect it. Bitcoin, fastest to $1 trillion, faster than any of the FANG companies. Everybody and their mother's got an opinion on why it's going to go to zero. So no, I mean, it's crazy.
It's unbelievable.
It's at $1 trillion, and your edge as an investor is still there. Your informational asymmetry is still there.
Think about this for a second, HODL. Facebook, by both parties, they feel is responsible for fake news, which they believe on each side, for the opposite side, is responsible for the poisoning of the minds of the opposite party, right? Both sides. To the point that they brought the founder of the company before Congress, okay? And yet they're against Bitcoin. They think that this company, not even just that they're against Bitcoin, the average person says, well, what if they regulate it? Do you not have a fear that they might regulate this company here, Facebook, that's infiltrating politics the way it's been and confusing the minds of millions of people? But they're not saying that, right? Because they're like, no, that can't happen. But you think it will happen to Bitcoin? I think there's generally speaking, people are just too fearful,
Quick aside, Mark Zuckerberg posted a picture on Facebook, I don't know, 2-3 months ago, of his two goats. Yep. He has two goats in the Bay Area behind his home. Their names are Maximalist, and Bitcoin. Those are the names of the goats. Okay. So it lets you know where Zuckerberg is putting his money and his mind share in this coming decade. Everybody who's smart and sophisticated in the Valley thinks that Bitcoin, and some of them think Ethereum. We could quarrel about that for hours and hours.
When he posted it, did he show the Bitcoin goat and then Max? Bitcoin Maximalist? I gotta look at the order. We'll put it in the phone. We'll put it in here.
I think he said Max and Bitcoin, but it's very obvious. I know a lot of Bitcoiners who have
catch the Max. That's so funny. I didn't catch that.
Yeah,
wow.
Yeah. No, I know a lot of Bitcoiners who have named their sons Max
because one of the most popular names right now.
think about it. But yeah, I mean, when you look at the informational asymmetry, think about Facebook at IPO, for instance. Facebook at IPO. Or Google at IPO, or really any of these companies at IPO. It was the same story on all of them. How are they going to make revenue? We don't understand this. This is some sort of new world bullshit where you just fake your metrics. How do we really know it's real? All that kind of stuff, right? And now they're all $1 trillion companies. So every bear who shorted them on Wall Street is now poor. Any company that China banned, if you would have bought it at the banning, you would have done tremendously well because China has banned all of these companies, right? It's China hates freedom and innovation, and these companies are free, innovative, and they're the new American industrial titans of this age, right? And Bitcoin is the oil of this age. So if you want to be Rockefeller, buy a shit ton of Bitcoin. I think that's why Zuckerberg is accumulating. Also, think about it from this perspective. He can't let the Winklevoss twins become richer than he is. So
yeah, bro. I bet he bought
for legacy
parity of the number of coins.
For legacy, he has to take a defensive position and make sure he's got more coins than they do.
That's so funny.
Oh
my God. Yeah.
Think about it.
Yeah.
Because
he probably did.
Oh, he doesn't want that.
How many do they have? How many did they have? They have like 20,000 or something?
They have 210,000 Bitcoin.
They have
between
200,000? They're way above Draper then, right?
Yeah.
So who's number one?
I think Draper.
So they're like number 2 to Satoshi, or no? There's more above them.
There's a lot of speculation, but there was a infamous Bitcoin character, Marche Popescu. I can't pronounce his name very well. He's Romanian, who died on a beach in Costa Rica just the other day. Some people think it's speculative that he had 1 million Bitcoins himself. Well, what's interesting is he didn't seem like the type. If you read his blog was extremely controversial and provocative, and there was a lot of terrible things in his blog. I won't go into it, but if you read his blog, which I did, because he also had a lot of smart things to say about Bitcoin early on. if you read his blog, you would know that essentially he was not the type to redistribute wealth to people who didn't earn it.
God.
And that would have included family members, friends, whomever, right? So it might be that 1 million Bitcoins are now gone from circulating supply forever, which would be super interesting and amazing if that was the case. Or it could be that he faked his own death.
If you believe in Bitcoin, do you want that? Do you want that? I'm just trying to think about that. Do you want that? That's a possibility. Do you want that? Like, do you want to take that out and make it so that it's gone forever?
Yeah,
It's positive for everybody else that remains,
because
except for the people
Bitcoin is
It
deflationary. So when you sacrifice coins to the network like that, it makes everybody else's coin holdings go up in value.
You're not going to do that to your kids, man.
No. So I'm going to give my kids my coin. I don't have enough to meaningfully impact the price like that, but Satoshi is rumored to have 1 million coins also, and those are gone. Or we think they're gone from circulating supply. It's most likely that Satoshi burned the keys to those coins because, listen, I don't know, he's worth like $35 billion at the moment.
He might be the American.
I don't know. Yeah, right. I don't know anybody.
Maybe I'm talking to him.
God, I wish I was. How old was I? I was a 17-year-old dumbass when the Bitcoin white paper was written. I still thought it was a good idea to do whippets in my college dorm room and stuff like that. So
hey, let me go with one more thing before we hop. So yesterday I'm on Clubhouse and I get an alert across my phone. And you might have been in the room, actually. Lamar, our friend Lamar, was in the room. So if Lamar, if you're watching this, I'm bringing you up. He's like, never talk about me. So Cathie Wood announces after the closing of the of the day, I guess the bell rang at 4:00. Around 4:30, the press release comes out that they're filed for an ETF Bitcoin. I'm like, that's big news, and Lamar's like, that's not news, and I'm like, it is news. It's like, they got, I don't know, $50 billion under management or something like that, and he's like, well, Van Eck filed it years ago. And I go, we all know that, but you don't think it's news that ARK Investments is going to try to do this too? And he was arguing with me that he doesn't think it's new news. I don't know where his head was at the moment, but like, what do you think? I think it's important news because it's just like when there's like 10 plus of these now in the US, when it eventually starts to fall, I think, right? Because first of all, I believe they'll eventually approve these. So when they eventually approve them, they starts to fall, they're going to go and get people to buy this from their institutional and or retail investors. Mostly a lot of retail are going to come in. They could have otherwise bought it, but now it's just a click of a button and they buy it. And there's an incentive financially, I would think, for these money managers to tell people to do that, because if it's under management, maybe they get a fee on that or something. So what do you think?
Oh, totally. When I also think the queue for the ETF is huge at the moment. Like somebody who you're friendly with, Scaramucci, he's in, Fidelity's in, Grayscale's in, the Winklevoss twins I think might be in again. Cathie Wood is in. I mean, listen, like when I saw Fidelity applying for a Bitcoin ETF, it told me something very specific, which was they have had conversations with people in Washington and they know that this is imminent, like that the approval is imminent, because why would they waste their time? And they're so large and powerful that they have these kinds of conversations before they make a move like this. So I think it's only a matter of time, and it's, depending on how it gets regulated and the structure of the thing. And there are some very prominent ETF lawyers who have been doing groundwork for this for years. I forget the woman's name, but she's the same woman who did the Gould spider back in the day. Can't remember her name at the moment, but she was working on the Van Eck one a while back, and she also worked with the Winklevoss twins, I think. So listen, it's imminent that there will be an ETF this year. We've been here, and by the way, we've been hearing this since 2016. So I understand Lamar's frustration. I really do have a strong feeling that this year it is going to happen, or early next year, because now America's behind. I mean, you can get them in Canada and Europe, et cetera. And so we've fallen behind and we need to catch up. So yeah, I think it will be approved. I think it's going to be super bullish for the price, because some of these institutions like pension funds, I have heard on behind the scenes that they actually require an ETF as a vehicle to invest. So they don't want custodial risk. They don't want to be in somebody's fund. They don't want a trust product.
And they're going to go reach out to their clients.
Exactly.
And say, let's move some money over. You should have some exposure. And now they have an incentive financially to do it too. So.
Exactly. So I think it's coming, and it will be a bullish event when it happens. Because talking about Bitcoin as a monetary network, one of the reasons it's important is young people have no problem onboarding to Bitcoin directly, getting access to their keys, taking self-custody. But older people, baby boomers, some Gen X, they do have a real problem with that. But they don't actually have that big of a problem with Bitcoin as a hedge, or Bitcoin as the new gold, or whatever. Everybody sees a number going up and they want to participate in that, right? So number go up drives in a lot of people. But the boomers can't some of them can't even send emails still. Like, let's just be real about it. So I think having an ETF for a monetary network, remember this is a monetary network, the boomers have most of the wealth still, right? Like Gen X has some wealth, millennials have basically no wealth, Gen Z has nothing. So, the older you are, the more wealth you have. And there is a big
So it's definitely inevitable at some point, even if it's many years from now, because they'll eventually get rolled over. Yeah.
Yeah. And this part of the reason I think the Bitcoin story is inevitable is because this monetary transfer that's going on from dying baby boomers to their millennial children is essentially like think about it like this. You're my friend, you have rich parents, and you had to watch me get rich in front of your eyes. And when your parents die, what are you going to do? You're going to go buy gold? No, you're going to try and keep up with me. So you're going to be like, I need to have as many Bitcoins as that fucking dude has, right? And so there's going to be this transfer over the next, 20, 30 years as the boomers die off where that happens. But I do think a lot of boomers are coming up the curve and at least getting some exposure in a portfolio, because you either got to be long Bitcoin or you got to be short Bitcoin. Like it's a binary bet, right? With everything, with every investment. Yeah. So you're either long it or you short it.
All right, guys. We got cut out. Technical issue. Jay's got to get some better freaking software for this crap. Thanks for coming on the show. I wanted to thank you once again for coming on and spending some time with me today. We'll do it again next month.
Thanks, brother. It was good to be on, man. I always love talking to you.
All right, man.
All right,
take it easy.
Peace.